And good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining the session where we'll be focusing on how we transform to net zero and sustainable supply chains. For those of you who were with us in the previous session, good to see you again. And for those of you new, my name is Yunus Jakupovic, and I look after the manufacturing vertical for UK and Europe at Network Science. I'll be moderating the next session and introducing our speakers shortly. So before we get into the actual presentation, I wanted to set the scene for the first session. Now, according to climate scientists, global carbon dioxide emissions must be cut by as much as 85% by 2050 to limit global mean temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. If temperatures rise above this level, it will produce unpredictable and dangerous impacts for people and ecosystems. As a result, the need to accelerate efforts to reduce greenhouse gases emissions is increasingly urgent. Existing government policies will not sufficiently solve the problem. Leadership and innovation from business is vital to making this progress. The corporate standard for greenhouse gases, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, classifies a company's direct and indirect greenhouse gases emissions into 3 scopes, which you can see on the slide here, and requires that company account for and report all Scope 1 emissions, so for example, direct emissions from owned or controlled sources, and all Scope 2 emissions, which are indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy consumption by the reporting company. The corporate standard gives companies flexibility in whether and how to account for Scope 3 emissions, i.e. all of the indirect emissions that occur in a company's value chain. But are companies actually ready for this? Do they have the mechanisms to measure and reduce these emissions? To discuss this, I am pleased to introduce you to the team from Supple AI, a company that is transforming supply chains to net zero. From Supple, I'd like to introduce you to Shobit and Shesha, who will be taking us through their presentation. Shobit, who is the CEO at Supple, is a technology professional with more than 25 years of industry experience. His focus is on building new age tech solutions to supply chains. Shobit has implemented large and complex programs exceeding $100 million in this space. In his past life, while he worked for Infosys and IBM, Shobit gained experience in software engineering, product architecture, business analysis, while implementing large and complex programs for enterprises across several different geographies. Shobit is also a postgraduate in industrial and management engineering. Joining him today is Shesha, who is the chief data scientist at Supple. Shesha has over 2 decades of experience in areas of AI and machine learning, including data mining, content analysis, and information retrieval, and with expertise in strategic analytics, research, and product innovation. Earlier, Shesha worked for organizations such as Strands Life Sciences, Yahoo, Travelocity, and Dell. Shesha also has a master's and PhD in system science and was awarded Dell Innovator of the Year in 2012. Furthermore, has over 10 patents in areas related to analytics, pattern recognition, and image processing. So it's with great pleasure I'd like to introduce you and hand over to Shobit and Shesha.
Thanks so much, and good morning, good afternoon, evening to all the participants here. Pleasure to be here. I think we are touching upon a great topic, which is about the carbon emission, the net zero objectives, and how supply chains can contribute to that. So let me, without much ado, let me get into the topic, and let me know if I'm able to share my screens. All right. So I will talk about a topic which is increasingly more relevant, and as Yunus also pointed out about how it's becoming, kind of a standard across the industry, and how different business enterprises are making efforts to address this. Right. Before I get a little deeper into the theme, I would like to just talk about a couple of different terminologies just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Yeah. So. Net zero, right? I mean, what is net zero? I mean, a very simple definition could be that it's an idea that every nation and all its building blocks can be carbon neutral, which basically means that we absorb as much carbon from the environment as we emit into it, right? And how do we emit carbon? By several different type of pollutants, which is a result of production, mining, transport. When you and I drive our cars, that's emitting, right? How do we absorb carbon? Largely, it's basis of reforestation and having more trees around, but there are also other strategies such as changing the way we consume our energies. The idea is that we are able to absorb as much as we emit, and that's simply the notion of net zero is, right. There's another term which is used very often in the literature today, and that's COP26. And sometimes we're not very sure what COP26 means. COP simply means conference of parties. It was a particular event, and COP26 was the 26th convention last year at Glasgow. And the special thing about COP26, and which is why it's so much in news, is because there was a very strong view that this is our last chance to do something about the emissions. And as a result of COP26, a lot of governments went back with a goal that broadly in the years of 2030 to 2035, we should achieve certain targets, right? So there was a kind of a seriousness which came about to achieve the targets. And in a lot of my conversations with my customers, I am finding that mandate to achieve target is translating into what businesses wants to do at their own levels. Yeah. So let's do a quick poll just to get a gauge everybody's what their sense is about being carbon neutral. So network science team, if you can please publish the first poll.
You're having some trouble with the slides if I try and help you out here.
Will it help if I stop sharing?
Yeah, if you can do.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating in the poll. Shobit and Shesha, I will just read them out for you, and it will be really good to get your thoughts on this. So, what sounds more true? Transforming the supply chains will be a game changer to attain net zero, or big opportunity to achieve net zero is in replacing the materials and methods of production. And 82% have said transforming the supply chains will be a game changer to attain net zero. So it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that.
Oh, I mean, that's absolutely bang on, and I can't be more pleased than the fact that so much more percentage actually sees supply chain as the game changer, and there are reasons behind it. So let me kind of pull on, and this is extremely great. In fact, that number is increasing. It looks like 92%, and guys, well done. But now let's look into some of the reasons that why it is so, and then I'm going to talk about how, from a tech perspective, we can help with that process. Yeah. So going back to my one sec. Are you able to see my next slide, please? If you can confirm it.
Yeah, is it across industries there is more
Right.
opportunity? Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, so that's absolutely right. I mean, there are different ways, different parts of a business which can be worked upon to reduce the carbon emissions. But I think the way things stand right now, the best place to address carbon emission is actually in the supply chains. And this is a very interesting study from Boston Consulting Group. And the study looked at 8 different industry verticals: food, construction, fashion, FMCG, electronics, automobiles, professional services, and other freight. Um, and as you can see, what the study establishes is that uh, you can do certain things from manufacturing, but you can do far more by by looking at how can you redo your freight, which basically means movement of the goods, and how you can address the problem of carbon emissions by looking at your supply chain, that is your sources or your vendors and suppliers themselves, right? By pushing for more compliance from your vendors, right? Uh, so, and why it is so? I mean, the simple thing is that when we look at supply chain, there's a lot that we can achieve by optimization. Whereas when we look at manufacturing, the answer to the question of higher carbon emissions essentially lie in material replacements or maybe changing the methods of production, which are a more long-term solution, and of course they are a more expensive solution. So at this point of time, the way things stand today, I would say the low-hanging fruit is looking at optimizations in the supply chain. Yeah. Um, and in if you were to scan around, and I find this even in my conversations with our customers, there are a number of things that businesses are doing today in the supply chain to basically reduce their emissions, to get to the objectives of net zero. Many of them are trying to do nearshoring, which means choose vendors which are closer to their production unit, closer to their distribution units, and so on. Many industries today are you know having needing a compliance from the partners, so that the partners are more sustainable, their methods of production are more sustainable, and therefore their supply chain is more sustainable, right? uh, Transportation, that's probably the biggest piece. Optimizing the routes, choosing the right vehicle mix, right? Moving to transport options with lower CO2 emissions, such as the electric trucks, choosing the different type of fuels, right? Then looking at the energy consumptions in warehouses, depots, right? Going paperless. So these are many different things that we are seeing that we see the businesses that we work with adopting in order to go in order to reduce their carbon emissions. Yeah. Before I get into data and systems, I would like to run one more quick poll. So network science team, if you can please beam that one. And then we will go further into systems and data.
Thank you, Shobit. Apologies, I was on mute there. So hopefully now everyone can see this second poll as well, which we would like you all to participate in. Just give everyone a few more seconds to select their options.
Mm-hmm.
It was very close at one point, and now it's 64%.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for participating.
Yeah. So I mean, this is amazing. So the choices were that the systems and data will drive the supply chain, and the other one was that the systems and data should adequately support. And both of them sound true, of course. The question really is that which of them should be more true. Yeah. and 64% of you have chosen that systems and data will drive the supply chain. And I think that is the reality. In most of the enterprises, if the net zero initiatives have to succeed, they have to succeed with the backing of the systems, with the backing of the data, which is collected all across the operations. Yeah. So that really was the point I wanted to drive, that this whole net zero thing, those of us who are from the tech side, have to play a very critical role in helping our businesses drive their net zero initiatives. Yeah. So thank you so much, participants, for participating in this. I will chug along and I will kind of get into the more important points now about how we see um, systems, technology, data to be influencing, to be helping the objectives of net zero, right? So when we look at different digital strategies, right, we realize that this is this fundamentally has to be digital led, right? So whether we're talking about digitization of supply chain operations, which basically means get deeper into the operations and for example, use technologies such as IoT to have sensors across the warehouses, to have sensors across your truck movement, and constant measurements of energy consumption patterns across the supply chain. That's digitization of supply chain, right? Looking at traceability of the movement of good, and looking at transparency and visibility, and we'll talk about this a little more. Across all the way from suppliers to the distribution to the retail points. That's a very important digital/technology strategy, right? KPI driven planning. When we look at, okay, where am I today? Can I benchmark myself? With respect to my emissions, right? And therefore, can I replan my operations, right? So when we move to a digital, when we deploy the digital strategies, we have more objective planning. We get to the point where we have more predictability in the system, and we can apply a lot more automation, right? This is the reason that why digital strategies are so critical to attain net zero. So we see a lot of role of technology, and I see that happening even in my interactions, my conversations, my solutioning, the way we work with it. We some of the conversations been in last 1 year, more and more customers are recognizing, more and more businesses are recognizing that they need to use digital, they need to use technology for the net zero objectives, right? Here is a great example. This is from an Indian company, Birla Cellulose, and they have deployed a solution. It's a blockchain-based solution, but basically this solution is called Green Track, and you can find this, there's a lot of material on this in the public domain. But I think it's a very interesting case in point about how, when you look at the supply chain, so they're in the business of producing, the fibers which basically go into creating the fabric, right? And it starts all the way from the forests, from where the wood is obtained, right? The wood is pulpified and so on. There are several different steps, as you can see in this picture here, and they have dozens of suppliers across this value chain, right? Now, what this solution does is that it maintains the traceability of the raw material across the stages, and at the end of this chain, all the data which is now available in terms of the sustainability of each supplier, sustainability of each step of the raw material, it's available. It can potentially be available to an end user. So when you go and pick your shirt in a store, there can be a QR code. With the QR code, you can understand, what kind of a sustainability tracing is there for this particular product, and as a consumer, you can exercise your choice. That, I think, is a very big step forward, because it's giving you the consumer as a chance to make choices and therefore influence the business, right? Next we will talk about visibility across the supply chain, and network science team, if we can play the video. This is from a platform that we have built at Supple. It's called Steer, and we have focused very heavily on providing end-to-end visibility, and which we believe is a very key component of
essentially builds a control tower view of a supply chain operation across the suppliers, distribution center, and transport. Here you can see the operations as of 14th of March, and this screen gives you a view of a warehouse supervisor that has the moment visibility of the load and the consignment as per the plan. These two boxes are around warehouse operations. These two boxes gives a summary of the transportation. The lower two boxes are around the asset management, and the right two bottom boxes are around the planning that they have. This plan load view is also available for the day. For example, as you can see on the screen, for the chosen date, different loads are available with different states of the planning and the operation. As you can see here, for example, load 11699 is planned for the delivery for the supplier ABS, and the distribution center is Swindon, and the consignment are moved and rearranged for the delivery at several different retail points in the region. The consignment number ending with 37.
All right, thank you so much. I hope that video gave kind of a view into how one could innovate new solutions so that you have visibility across the supply chain. Right. Now, just to kind of conclude and summarize some of the points here, and some of these are really based on our own observations, our own learnings that we are sharing with you here. So one is that the having an integrated view of the processes is very important. Very often in the businesses, we find that the processes and therefore the data coming in from, let's say, from the supplier side, from the transportation side, the warehousing or the distribution side, is quite fragmented. And what we have tried to do in our work is try to bring it together. And when we bring it together, we find that by putting the data together, you have a better visibility of several different KPIs. Now, when in that a demo video, when you saw the sustainability index, it was possible to construct that index because we had a view of both warehouse and transportation, right? So that's very fundamental, and I think increasingly businesses should look at having a control tower view, having an integrated view of the processes, and that's something which is critical to look at the to benchmark and evaluate the net zero goals, right? That's one. Secondly, once you have this kind of a data, then it becomes possible to apply a lot of analytics, a lot of predictive capabilities, and that's where we bring in several AI and ML capabilities to predict or to recommend many decisions in the supply chain. So, for example, in that video, you saw that there was an opportunity to consolidate the loads further, right? So, can I combine the deliveries? Can I consolidate the loads? Can I in some manner look at a different way of storing my consignments, my goods in the warehouse, and so on? These are the capabilities that are possible once you have the data available on the platforms. And last but not the least, I think one of our key realizations is that in supply chain operations, when we target higher sustainability, we are also targeting better economics for the business, right? And which is the reason, it's kind of my confirmation to the study that I looked at from BCG, that supply chains is really what offers the best opportunity to achieve net zero goals, and probably the opportunities that will come from manufacturing or methods of production will probably follow that, right? So this is in a summary what I wanted to share today, and I'll be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Shobit and Shesha. So with that being said, we have launched the Q&A part of the session, which is my favorite part because it means we get to ask you guys lots of questions. So I hope you're ready for that as well. So I do want to encourage everyone in the audience to please get involved and ask some questions. We do know this is a very, very relevant topic at the moment, and I'm sure that there's plenty of questions that you guys have there as well. So we've already had the first few questions, which I'll go through slowly. So, Shesha, feel free to decide who's best to answer these as we go through as well. So which technology could be the most effective and viable in your organization's journey towards net zero?
So when we say technology here, I'm presuming it is reference to I think IT or the systems technologies, I believe. I would say from that perspective, adopting open source technologies, and which are there for both systems development as well as for data science, is probably the best bet, because that is how you integrate with several different sources of data, right? There are many organizations which are invested into proprietary technologies, which is fine, but I do see that they have a higher, there are much higher barriers for them to integrate several different data sources, which is very much a need towards the net zero goals. So that's my perspective, Stephanie. Kesha, you want to add something to that?
I would say I would agree with it. If you give it a twist, then on the technology solution side, we would say definitely cloud-based technology are very important. At the same time, IoT and the blockchain are becoming critical piece out here, and those are something we are deep into. Some very very interesting POCs and implementations which are already there on our solution. Super exciting time for us to just, if you look at the example where you just walk out of the store and not even pay at the counter. So those are becoming reality, and I would say those are again very very important part of technology, which are just getting into the fabric of supply chain.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you both. I'm going to move through some of the other questions as well. So, what steps can companies take immediately towards achieving net zero?
Okay, so Manisha, my view would be, the low-hanging fruit lies probably in the transport operations, followed by the warehousing operations. And the reason I say so is because when you look at the transport operations, there is an immediate opportunity without even changing your infrastructure to look at how do you optimize your routes, for example, how do you improve your load capacity, right? How do you optimize your capacity rather, right? Uh, that does not need any change in your infra. That does not need any change. You don't have to change trucks. You only have to look at different ways of doing it, right? Beyond that, I would say looking at the vehicle mix, looking at your storage strategies or your pick and pack strategies within your warehouse. These would be the next, the next set of optimization opportunities that I would recommend to any business.
Just a follow-up question on that. In my experience with some of these technologies as well, a lot of customers talk about the capital investment and the financial side of investing in some of these technologies, and I know that's a huge barrier for businesses, especially at the moment. So, what would you say to businesses with those concerns?
Yeah. So you talked about scope 1, 2, and 3, right? And so a lot of these stuff where you need capital investments are actually in scope 3, and some of them also in scope 1, because when you're looking at what is it that I'm burning myself, right? But when you look at scope 2, I mean, I would think those are the right things to pick first, because you're really looking at where do I optimize my operations rather than changing my infrastructure, right? And the examples that we have seen, particularly when you look at route optimizations and optimizing your capacity utilization, doesn't need any change in infra, does not need any capex. I mean, these are the early wins, and these are ways to demonstrate and prove that you can actually make changes in the supply chain and actually go towards net zero. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so just looking into this a little bit more as well. So one of the key areas that businesses are involved in is, of course, supply chains, and with their customers and suppliers of raw materials and so on, especially in the manufacturing sector. So it's not just a case of, let's say, upgrading your own systems and doing what you can to reduce your carbon footprint. Yeah. How can, let's say, suppliers to large OEMs work with their customers or also their suppliers to achieve this across the whole supply chain? What would you suggest?
My sense is that when we talk about the suppliers to the manufacturers, it's very important to drive the agenda, drive the mandate to be compliant, to ask for improvements in their own emissions, and set targets. And I think all of this really starts with benchmarking. You cannot just say improve. You have to say this is where you and we are. And I think there has to be a very collaborative approach between the manufacturers and their suppliers. And one has to use the data. One has to be very objective to say that this is where we stand today. This is the benchmark of the emissions. And these are the emissions which could be from the production processes. These could be from the procurement of the raw material. This could be from the freight, right? And these are actually from several different areas. It's very important to bring that data together, right? Establish the benchmarks and have the agreements that over next 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, these are the kind of goals that you and I are going to have together, right? And if you look at it, today we are sitting in 2022, and most of the organizations have taken targets which are ranging between 2030 and 2035. So we're looking at 8 years, 10 years, maybe 15 years. We're not looking at a lifetime here. So it's very important that these conversations happen now with the suppliers and use the data to benchmark the goals.
Fantastic, thank you. I thought that might be a bit of a tricky question for you. And the other side is, okay, so we know what to do, we have everything in place. As a bit of advice, who could help a business in this position who wants to embark on this journey?
So can you come again with that? I didn't quite catch
So a
that.
business who's in this position where they want to, let's say, start their journey and they know more or less the investments they need to make and what they need to do, who can they look to for help with this? Because you can't do everything alone. And I think it'll be interesting to hear Supal's perspective where you can help along that cycle.
Totally. One, we must acknowledge that this is a very nuanced, very complex area. And if I'm running a business, the first thing I will do is to look at experts who understand emissions, who understands the topics under climate change, and who understand my own, production, my materials, my freight, etc. Right? That I think goes without saying. Right? You need that expertise. But I do see a very strong role for organizations such as Supple, because we are the folks who bring in tech. We are the folks who bring in processes, systems, and data science, right? And I don't believe for a second that any of the initiatives can succeed without technology helping the business, right? So we should not be shying away from this as tech folks. I think we have to step into it. We have to work with folks in the business. We have to work folks who actually work on the sustainability and the emission side, whether they be in supply chains or even they be in manufacturing. I think we have to provide them with the systems and the data capabilities so that they can carry on with achieving their goals.
Thank you. I'm going to prompt the audience for some more questions as well. We're also going to run a poll. So it's our third poll of the session. So just to help the audience out, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should be able to toggle between the poll and the Q&A, and be able to give us some feedback on that as well.
Really?
Shobit and Shesha, while people are looking at the poll and thinking of some of their questions as well, I take it you've worked in several different geographies, not just as Supple, but in your previous roles as well. Yeah. In terms of being competitive on a global scale, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. What geographies do you seem to think are more ahead of the curve when it comes to AI in this space?
Okay, I'll give you my perspective, and Shesha's might be different from mine. I definitely see, that geographies such as UK and Europe are way ahead of others. There's a lot more awareness, and I think a lot of it is driven by both the consumer awareness as well as the mandates which are coming in from the levels of the governments to push the businesses, and therefore the businesses to utilize technologies such as what we offer to go towards the net zero goals. And also very surprisingly, and I'm from India, and I'm very happy to note that there's a lot of initiative within India. I mean, India has a very large initiative for I think it's called a Billion Tree Initiative, right? Now that's a government initiative, but the point is that in the presence of such initiatives, it just creates a huge amount of awareness, right? So I think the other parts of the world are surely going to catch up. And the reason they're going to catch up is because probably, it is other parts of the world, such as the Asia, the Africa, the Middle East, which probably are more impacted, by the climate change than the UK and the Europe. I mean, but I think it's just a matter of time before the governments get more sensitive, before the populations get more demanding from the businesses. But I think it's sure to catch up all across the world.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Shesha, I'm also going to put you on the spot.
Yes. So I think what is very interesting is I would take a different view here. Gen Z, the young generation which is coming up, which are into actually spending, they are very, very sensitive and aware about what kind of food they eat, what kind of products they buy, what kind of ecosystem they are into. And actually, they started looking into sustainability as a kind of way of living. And if you look at it, my view, US, UK, Europe are way ahead, and sustainable clothing, all kind of stuff which is coming back into fashion and everywhere. So Gen Z is driving us than just looking at geography. Um, I think we can make a difference, and companies have started being aware of the KPIs. When you measure, you can improve, right? And net zero is actually exactly going towards it. So, in my view, I think next generation is going to drive us all here.
That's fantastic. And I completely agree. I think the younger generations coming through are really driving some of the changes in the world. And also, I think those businesses that put their trust into the younger generations as well to maybe lead some of these initiatives, and to support with the innovation process, I think they will be the forward thinking businesses and ahead of the competition from that perspective. So I completely agree. Shobit, you were going to say something as well?
No. I mean, I can't agree more. And I think those of us here, who are parents to teenagers, we know that how demanding the teenagers are when they want to go and buy their own clothes or pick the food off the shelf. So I think that's totally true. I was also about to say that to me, it's also a bit of a 25 years back, when I started working in the industry, the big word was quality, and there was a lot of drive towards quality and how you attain to quality goals. And I think sustainability or environment is today's normal for quality.
No, I completely agree as well. Okay, so we're coming towards the end. I think this has been, really fantastic. I've enjoyed the presentation and the Q&A as well. Thank you to all the participants for getting involved. Before we conclude and I introduce the next session and let people know the agenda, Shobit, Shesha, thank you very much. And any final comments from yourselves?
Thank you so much. I mean, I enjoyed the question answer session the most, I think. It was lovely, and it makes me also think about a lot of different things which are relevant in this stage. So thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, the audience. And thank you, Network Science.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Right, thank you, everyone. I'm just bringing up the next part of the session. So thank you, everyone. That's all we have time for this session. I do have a couple of other things to go through before we end and move on. I want to thank the speakers once again, Shobit and Shesha, for going through that once again. I know we all found that very useful, and I also want to thank you, the audience, for joining us. Before you leave and jump on to the next session, if you haven't already, we are running the poll to get some of your feedback on these sessions. Of course, this is an annual event for Network Science, and we're always looking to improve and make sure we give our audience exactly what they're looking for. So please, it's really useful for us to have this information, and we'd appreciate that from you. I do hope that you will join us again in the next 15 minutes, where we will be running a panel discussion. And that panel will be focusing on Industry 4.0. So we'll have a short opportunity to take a break, maybe grab a coffee or some refreshments and come back in. And I do really encourage everyone to join this panel. We have an absolutely fantastic global panel here with some great speakers. I'm not going to reveal all just yet, but I will introduce one of our colleagues, Pablo, who will be actually moderating and running the session for us. So Pablo is one of our very own advisory board members, is the president of Kennedy Executive Search Global Executive Search and Talent Development Firm Network since 2021. He's also managing partner for North America at Talent Corporate Solutions. Pablo is a business leader who started his career in Argentina with Santander Rio Bank and spent 20 years with Kimberly-Clark in Argentina, Brazil, and the US, in roles of increasing responsibility in the consumer and B2B businesses. Most recently, Pablo was president of Microban International, a global leader in odor control innovation with such diverse customers as Procter & Gamble, Ecolab, Nike, Under Armour, Uniqlo, and Paneria Group. After completing undergraduate and graduate studies in Buenos Aires, he received his master's degree in business administration. So please join Pablo and ourselves in the panel discussion in approximately 15 minutes. But for the time being, thank you very much for joining this session. Please give us your feedback, grab some refreshments, and join us shortly. Thank you.